Okay, Yancey, thanks for joining us. We were counting on you.
So one meeting I need to be at.
We have one attendee,
All right.
but now we have none because the attendee was a panelist.
Okay, well, okay, so Peter.
We can, let me call the meeting to order. We take roll call. Trustee Griffin,
Here.
Trustee Zuniga.
Here. I'll be on camera.
Let's see, who else? Trustee Land,
Here.
Trustee Dwyer,
Here,
and I am here. So we have our Spanish interpreter for the meeting this evening, Mr. Montaldo. For those who would like to attend the meeting in Spanish, that option is available. Enrique, would you please communicate that to us for this evening?
Buenas tardes, tenemos a nuestro intérprete de español para la reunión de esta tarde. Para aquellos de ustedes que quieran asistir a la reunión en español, esta opción está disponible. Gracias.
Okay. And if you wish to view closed captions of this meeting, please view the meeting on the San Mateo High School Board Meeting YouTube channel. That link to the YouTube channel can be found on our website. You can view the captions in English as we live stream the meeting tonight, and you can view the captions in a variety of other languages if you choose to watch after this meeting has ended. Viewers may request additional accommodations by calling 650-558-2201. If you wish to make a comment tonight about a special agenda item, namely there's only one, the study session item on the budget, you may do so. Please use the raised hand feature on the Zoom to be recognized when invited to do so by the board president. And you'll be admitted to speak during the public comment period. The board president will call on you. Please note that comments are limited to 3 minutes, and the board president may increase or decrease the time allowed for public comment depending on the number of persons wishing to be heard. So I think we can move right to the governing board public comments. I don't see any public comments. I don't see any attendees, in fact. Was there any governing board comments before the presentation? I see none. So why don't we move to item D, the budget study session.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hawkins and his team will take care of this agenda item. I just want to say, that just in case anybody watches it later, that this is a more informal event, and it helps us when we do get to the budget discussion and then action in June. We will be much more prepared. In addition, it helps staff prepare for the budget by having this study session in April. We can take your input. Hopefully you'll see your input already in this, and then prepare the budget for your adoption in June. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Yancey Hawkins.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Skelly. So yes, as Dr. Skelly noted, this is the study session for the budget. The preliminary budget will come next. That's on June 9th in the board meeting, along with the version of the LCAP. And then on the 23rd, the board will be asked to approve the final budget along with the final LCAP for the district. The focus of tonight is to go over have a discussion of the major budget assumptions that we are planning for the 2022-2023 year. I'm here to answer questions, and if they're too hard, I've got the two right people to answer those in Valerie Miller and Vanessa Castano, who really do all the hard work on this. All right, we can start up the presentation.
Sorry, the little technical difficulty. Give us half a second, please.
No worries.
Okay, Mr.
All right.
Hawkins.
Perfect. Next slide. If you've ever been in an accounting class, you might understand this slide, but this cat knows the right answer. But we're not going to make you cry tonight. We're gonna get rid of the accounting. We're going to talk about the business of it. So next slide. Tonight, we're going to go over the main takeaways from the 22-23 budget process. We're going to go into a quick overview of the factors that impact our budgets. We'll detail some of the program investments that we've made over the last year and projected into 22-23. We will take a look at the enrollment projections and how they impact our individual campuses. We'll do a detailed look at the staffing projections for 2022-2023. We'll focus on the impact of the state mandated increases to retirement rates. Those are STRS and PERS. We'll talk about employee compensation, focus on the one-time COVID relief funding and those impacts, and then look at the overall budget assumptions as we work into 2022-23. All that said, we will look at a summary of the 2021-22 estimated actuals. So where we believe that we are right now to close out the 21-22 year and get your first look at the 22-23 budget specifically. And the last, we'll just talk about next steps on our way to the June 9th and June 23rd meeting. Next slide. So the main takeaways, and I really, this is for the board, but also for kind of the public of, if you don't remember anything from this presentation, here are the things that I wanted to focus on. So our secured property tax growth from the AV, the assessed value tracker from San Mateo County at the end of last week was 6.3%, moving into 22-23. That's ticked up a little bit this week. The district is going to be significantly and continues to be significantly impacted by the state mandated increases to the pension rates. The rates are increasing by 2.2 and 2.5% respectively, will cost the district an additional $2.5 million for 2022-23. And to put that into perspective, that would be the same as an addition of 14 teachers. So just to kind of put that into perspective. We also, as we living through COVID and the one-time COVID relief funds, those have been very much appreciated by districts across the state and the country. But that also comes with operational impacts as we have to start weaning ourselves off some of that one-time funding. We still have the continued impacts of COVID-19. I mean, nothing is as it's clear as where we were in January, where we had to really step up testing and purchase KN95 masks and other COVID impacted expenditures. We've made significant investments. I think those investments are in line with the board and the community's values. We are starting to see the impact of declining enrollment. The district had been slowly increasing enrollment over the past 10 to 15 years. And a couple of years ago, we started to decline, and we are continuing to see that and projecting to decline as we move into the future. The most important thing of that is we are not seeing a steady decline across the district. That decline is being impacted at a few different school sites. One really positive is that the district is in a strong financial position to face this challenge, any of these challenges. And that's mainly based on the board's decision-making and fund balance policy. And so we're really in a good place to face any of these challenges. The last is, while we expect a May revision to the governor's budget in early May, his January proposal really showed no significant impacts, new money to SMUHSD, and included no relief for school districts for the state mandated increases in pension rates, STRS and PERS. Next slide. So what factors impact our budget? I noted earlier the San Mateo County Assessed Valuation Tracker. Our largest revenue item is our secured property taxes. And so our largest increase every year is that. So we have to track that daily. The San Mateo County Office of Education gives us budget guidelines, and they are oversight. So they use what's called the common message to give us budget guidelines to work by. We have the adopted federal budget. The state budget won't be approved before our budget. So we'll have to be using some assumptions of what's in the governor's May revise in that, but that budget will likely be approved by June 30th of this year. Our enrollment projections, that's obviously an important tool to look at our staffing numbers. As I noted before, we are slightly declining year over year. Our staffing projections, those are driven by our enrollment numbers and then our specific needs, where we're putting investments around certain groups of students. Collective bargaining, obviously, our relationships with our partners impact our budget. To be clear, we don't have an increase related to collective bargaining in this, as we haven't finalized that. But I will get into what the cost of, a 1% or say a 3% increase to compensation would be later in the presentation. We have all the changes to payroll tax rates, retirement rates, PERS and STRS, health and welfare benefits. COVID-19 obviously continues to impact our budget, as well as special education needs. Next slide. We've made several significant ongoing and one-time investments over the last year and into next year. We believe that they reflect both the board's and the community's values, and which are to support our students that are in need of some additional support. We have to be careful on these investments, as we can only spend each dollar once. And in the end, most of our decisions are really come down to opportunity costs. So some of those positions include COVID-related health aid lead and health aides, social workers district-wide and at Peninsula High School, ELD teachers and mental health therapists, psychologists, student success coordinators, special education aides, intervention teaching sections, et cetera. And we also have put significant investments into the anti-racist training in 21-22, and that will continue into 22-23. The state has improved our new teacher induction program, which we believe will really serve our new teachers well. And then I noted the state mandated pension increases. I put that in programmatic as that relates to having a fiscally sustainable retirement for all of our employees. This is not a complete list, but this is a pretty significant list. Next slide. As you can see, through 2019-20, we were seeing increases to our enrollment over the past 10 plus years. But starting in 2020-21, we started to see a decline, and we continue to project that moving forward. We're projecting approximately a 1% decline each year on average, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less over that years. But as I noted, that impact is not seen evenly across the district. We're seeing that at a few specific sites. Next slide. As you can see at Aragon was increasing, but we're seeing roughly a flat enrollment trend with a tiny tick up. So we're projecting 1766 for next year. Next slide. Burlingame, similarly, we see roughly flat enrollment with a small trend downward, but pretty small. Next slide. So Cappuccino is one area that when I noted that our campuses are not seeing this evenly, as you can see, we're projecting, we saw a 7% decrease this year. We're projecting another 3% next year, and then an average of about a 5% decrease each and every year after that. Over the next 5 years, we're projecting to see almost a 25% or 250 kid decline over that. With declining enrollment can come some pretty significant impacts to programs. At Cappuccino specifically, we're going to have to really monitor this closely, and we're going to likely need to either look at some necessary small school related staffing in order to continue a full comprehensive program, or really look to attract students from other areas of the district over the next 5 years to look at kind of what's the new normal at Cappuccino High School. Next slide.
Did you have a question on Cappuccino, Greg, or?
I had a question a while ago. So,
sorry. Trustee Land.
So I guess, Mr. President Hanley, do we want to ask questions as we go, or do we, because it's really a lot of slides and I don't want to forget my questions. Is it okay if I ask a question then?
Yeah, what would you like to do, Yancey?
I'm okay with whatever the board wants to do.
Okay. So I guess one of the minor questions I had, I mean, I definitely appreciate the declining enrollment and we need to discuss that. There was a slide that talked about the overall declining enrollment district-wide, and it said less DTech, but it only had one slide, basically less DTech.
Yeah, so hold on, go back to that. There, that's perfect. So all the numbers up top include, so the charter school is included in our full enrollment. So DTech is included, it's about 600 students, about 150 students per grade, and is included in all of those numbers. So in 2018, it would be 8,800. In 2019, it would be about 9,300, et cetera, as we go across. So the top numbers all include DTech, and then we just pull out purely the students that are served on our comprehensive and other campuses are about 8,500 projected for next year.
Okay, but I don't see that in the other years. That's kind of what I was getting at, is I wanted to have a comparison and I only have one number.
So so the DTech number is very consistent across those years, but I'd be happy to send out something that shows that.
So it is.
So if you just took 600, if you just subtracted 600 from all of those other numbers, that basically gives it to you?
That's
Exactly.
all I need to know. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Peter.
you.
I needed it in that language.
Sorry, Trustee Land. All righty. I think we're at Hillsdale. Slide 10. Perfect. So Hillsdale, we see relatively flat projected enrollment at Hillsdale, right around 1,550 in the current year, projected for next year and moving forward. Next slide. So Mills, as you can see, has been decreasing at about 3.5% a year. We're projecting another 3.5%. That we project it to go down a little bit, tick up a little bit, but then decline. This is one of the schools, if you look at, it's lost approximately 10% of its students over the last 5 years. And we project it to lose a few more over the next. So this is more one that I think we need to kind of monitor. But obviously, in the last 15 years, this campus has declined significantly in terms of enrollment. Next slide. At Peninsula, it shows a slight decline. I don't think that's likely. I think it'll likely at least be even on that. But every year, Peninsula's enrollment is really based on specific needs of students and of students that year. So we'll see. We'll watch this closely, obviously, as we get referrals in the Peninsula. Next slide. We're projecting relatively flat enrollment, although we are projecting about a 1.5% decrease for last year, but I mean for this next year. But we are projecting relatively flat enrollment moving forward. It is important to note that this campus is down about 100 students from what it was 5 years ago. At about 1705, we're right around 1,600, and we're going to dip a little bit below that projected in the next 5 years. Next slide. So I apologize for the very small print on this, but I really, in the need for full transparency, I wanted to kind of put all of that in. Overall, just generally, I'll go over the certificated staffing. Generally, we have lower regular staffing as our staffing is directly related to enrollment. So we've got some enrollment declines projected. So the regular staffing related to that has been taken out. We also have seen an increase in specialized programs. That includes a 4.0 FTE increase in our ELD staffing to match up with the significant increases we've seen, especially in our ELD 1, and as well as some special education staffing. As the board knows, we've been bringing back some of our students from the county programs, and so we continue to build capacity in our special education programs in order to try to serve more of our students. We also see the removal of some of the ELO section. Those are the Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant funding. We've increased that starting in 21-22, and we're slowly stepping down from those investments as those are for one-time funding. Next slide. Overall, we see a total administrative staffing, certificated administrative staffing of 538, which is pretty consistent with 2021, 2022, but moved around in the ways that I discussed. Next slide. So classified, again, I apologize for the small print here, but I wanted to really get the detail in here for that. We spoke of some of the additions that we've made in here, including the health aides and lead, as well as the special education aides and social worker throughout the program, amongst others. We're seeing our staffing numbers are relatively similar to 2021, 2022. But again, some of those ELO funding starting to step down a little bit, but some of our investments in the other areas increasing. So if we can go, I think 2 slides, slide 9. Or
I think
slide
Linda has a
19.
question.
Yeah.
Linda, you're mute.
Here we go. Could we go back to 15, page 15 real quick? I think that's where I had the question. Okay, so the special ed, I was concerned about the special ed staffing at San Mateo. It didn't look as robust, but now I'm looking at it and I can see where they, yeah, because look at Hillsdale. I was looking at Hillsdale versus San Mateo.
And
Basically,
Trustee
but
Dwyer, I think you may be looking at the classified. I think it's more.
Yeah, it was
it's
classified.
It's more significant on that side.
Yeah,
So-
that's the one I wanted to see.
At San Mateo, the regular, or if we can go to 15 real quick, and then I will answer the question on.
I think
So-
maybe it isn't 15, is it 17? It's the special ed classified.
Yeah.
That's the one I was concerned.
So no, I agree. But let me explain something on 15,
Okay.
which will help
Okay.
explain your question on the next slide. So our special education, I apologize. Can we go back one slide to 15? Thank you. Appreciate it. So that first, the line of special education program SAI SDC / RSP 22:1 slide right there. So this is our staffing, our standard staffing that's based on special education enrollment. So San Mateo has the largest number of RSP, SDC, our kind of our regular program in special education. And so their allocation is 9.4. So they do have the largest. But where the staffing, you'll see differences is in that TEC, Bay Academy, AAC. And so those are all of our specialized programs. In some other districts, you might hear them as, SDC classes. But at Hillsdale, there are 5 specialized programs. And whereas at San Mateo, we don't have any specialized classes. We have our standard special education classes. And so there's going to be a difference there. The bigger difference comes on the classified side, where those specialized classes, whereas our regular special ed class may have 1 aide in those classrooms, those specialized classrooms can have 2 and 3 aides in there. So when you look at, that TEC Bay Academy line, Hillsdale has 5. That could be 10 to 15 aides related to that class. And Mills has 4 of those classes. So you could see, 8 to 12 aides related to those programs. So if we can go to, I believe, Trustee Lees Dwyer's question is on the next
17?
one, 16, I think exactly where Shar was earlier. But yeah, you see at Hillsdale that 12.67 of instructional aid 2, and at Mills 8.25.
Yes.
Those are related very specifically to the specialized program. And
Okay.
so it really, if you look at, the 25 for Hillsdale versus the 13 for San Mateo, San Mateo has 8.88 FTE for their regular special education classrooms, but they don't have any in those specialized programs.
That's the information I needed. Thank you.
You got it. All right, if we can go on to slide 19. Overall, the total classified staffing is projected at 453.84. So overall, we're very consistent year to year. We have just under 1,000 FTE district-wide, both classified and certificated. But we have had movement kind of within the allocations this year. Next slide. I spoke about the state mandated increases to the pension rates of all of our employees. STRS is our retirement system for our teachers, principals, and certificated staff. As you can see, the state gave us some one-time relief for a couple of years in 2021 and 21-22. That relief is scheduled to go away, and the governor's proposal in January did not include any relief. That impact is set in statute, the increase, and that's from 16.9% to 19.1%. So a 2.2% increase year over year. Next slide. In terms of PERS, PERS is our classified employee. That rate actually increases more than our STRS rate. It's 2.5% instead of the 2.2% in STRS, although our salaries related to PERS are quite a bit smaller than the ones related to STRS. So the STRS impact from a pure dollar amount is considerably higher. Overall, I noted the impact of the increase to the state mandated STRS and PERS rate is $2.5 million or the equivalent of adding 14 teachers. Next slide. So as we look at our assessed value growth and employee compensation, I noted that as of yet, we have not included an increase to our employee compensation. We are currently in negotiations, and we do expect that there will be an increase included for the preliminary budget on June 9th and the final budget on June 23rd. But for 18-19 and 19-20, we were seeing strong AV growth in the mid 7s and salary increases around 4%. In that slowed in 2021 and 21-22 to 5% and 3%. And then looking forward, the AV growth, and this was as of last Thursday, 6.3%. As I've noted, it's ticked up a little bit from there. But that's looking stronger, and we're hoping that it's moving towards that 7% plus that we were seeing in 18-19, 19-20 and before. But we continue to monitor that daily. In terms of employee compensation costs, we have step and column costs of an average of 1.2%, which equates to about $1.5 million each year in the budget. And just to kind of put things into perspective, as we didn't include any increases to employee compensation costs, the cost of 1% to all units in the district. So if all employees received a 1% raise, the total in cost, including salary and benefits, would be approximately $1.3 million. And the cost of 3% increase would be just under $4 million at $3.9 million. Next slide. The district has received well over $15 million in one-time COVID relief funding. These 4 sets of funding are still being spent in the district. That includes the in-person instruction grant, which is projected to be spent fully by the end of this fiscal year. We have the Expanded Learning Opportunity Grant, which the district has combined with ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. And when I say ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, I mean the December 2020 and early 2021 federal COVID funding bills that were passed by Congress. We are still spending those down, but we are stepping those down gradually over a 3 to 4 year period for those investments that we've made. Next slide. Now getting into some of the details of our assumptions. We have a secured tax increase projected at 6.3% based on the AV when this was published. That's offset by a small projected decrease to our unsecured taxes. Our unsecured taxes are based on the actual business property that's in the district as of the date of taxes, and that goes up and down. We saw a pretty significant decrease in our unsecured taxes related to airlines moving airplanes out of SFO during the pandemic. We're hoping we saw a little bit of that come back this year, but that fluctuates significantly. And the last 2, first interim and second interim, we talked about $2.4 million in additional redevelopment agency one time that we received this year. So we have to pull that out of the budget moving forward. In terms of state and federal funding, we're pulling out that one-time COVID relief money that we talked about earlier. And then local revenue, all of our local revenue, which, a lot is our the foundations, is our PTAs, is a lot of those funding. And that revenue we project and we budget only when those were received. So we expect that those funds will likely be received in this year, but we budget them as they're received. I think Trustee Land has a question.
Yeah. So I really appreciate all those explanations because that was my questions and you answered them. So the last one though, the 2.9 million in other local, you're saying that those are going to be those are unanticipated because they're PTA, PTO, or foundation money that we probably will receive, but we can't really count on it. Therefore, you're putting it as a zero.
Correct, because we don't give the sites the spending authority
Right.
until we either have a commitment letter from the organization or the funds are actually received. So
Okay.
they can't spend it until we receive it, or we receive a commitment letter from an organization that we've worked with. in the
Okay.
past.
However, we do anticipate. What is our anticipated? What do you think is going to be the anticipated increase there compared to year? Is it always 2.9? Is it going down? I kind of want to know where we're at with that.
It's relatively steady
Okay.
year to year. We don't see really wide, unless it's a 1 year. This year, I think the foundation of one of the high schools paid for additional security cameras. So you saw a pretty big bump in that. But the funds, especially the funds that are used in any kind of staffing, they stay very similar from year to year.
Okay. And the only other question I have is, can you help me understand the redevelopment agency decrease again? I know you described it, but I need a little bit more explanation.
So, Governor, this goes back a long time, but the state Supreme Court ruled against redevelopment agencies a long time ago. And so they've all been in the course of being unwound over the last 10 years. And so those redevelopment agencies were funded by the marginal increase in taxes. And some of those funds go to school districts. Now, how those are allocated is a really complex formula and changed with different agreements that were made by the different RDAs. So we have several RDAs within our district. And so the allocation of those funding was different depending on how the RDA worked. About a year ago, there was a lawsuit that went to the California Supreme Court. I believe it was from Chula Vista, that basically pushed back against how those fundings were allocated between local agencies. So between school districts, cities, counties, all of those specific. It was found that most counties were doing that incorrectly. And there was a one-time true up in how those funds were reallocated. So we're actually very lucky. Most of the school districts in San Mateo County actually saw a one-time big decrease in their RDA funds. I believe South San Francisco saw a $4 or $5 million one-time decrease in their RDA dollars from there because of just how the different calculation worked. But that's done. Moving forward, we saw a bump annually. We already saw that starting last year. And then this year, we saw the one-time true up of that of $2.4 million. So basically, our revenue is $2.4 million artificially high this year because of a true up payment. And that'll go.
This is our true up payment.
This is our true up payment.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I know that was boring.
No, informative. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Next slide. In terms of expenditures, you see a big decrease in our expenditures. That mostly relates to taking out that one-time COVID relief funding. It won't be this significant as there will be carryover from those funds. As I noted, we'll be spending those over a 3 or 4 year period. So I don't expect that, but we are projected to spend those funds, fully spend those funds in this year. And if they do carry over, when they carry over, those will be budgeted in 22, 23. The one exception to that, as you can see, is those employee benefits, and that's almost completely driven by the increases in our PERS and state mandated increases to PERS and STIRS of $2.5 million. Next slide. One area that I do kind of want to focus on is we are seeing a pretty significant increase in our utility costs, specifically energy. The projection from PG&E is almost 10% for next year. That's just a little plug for our solar powered schematic development that the board will see on May 5th. Election costs, every other year we have an election, so that wasn't in the current year budget, but that's in this. This will be the first trustee area, so it'll be important to look at what the cost of. We're hoping that the cost will be less in trustee areas because you're not doing an election across the entire district, only 3/5 of the district, but we will see. And then next slide. So I made you wait all the time. I didn't give us the final piece first. But here is kind of our first look at the 22-23 budget, as well as an update from our 2021-2022 estimated actuals. So for the current year, we're projecting about a $1.5 million deficit. That is 100% related to the spend down of one-time COVID funds. We're actually on the unrestricted side seeing a fund balance increase of about $850,000. That's related to at P2 property, sorry, at the P2 property tax, we saw an increase in unsecured revenue, that movable business property of a little less than $1 million. So that's what's driving that number. Into 2022, 2023, we're projecting an excess of revenues over expenditures of about 3.8 million. But I need to really focus the board on that no increase to employee compensation is included in that. So when we settle with our partners, that'll obviously change by the impact of any raises given. Overall, our fund balance, we're seeing about an 18 to 19% overall fund balance, putting us in a good position around dealing with those issues that we've talked about. And some of that obviously is that one-time COVID funding that will be spent over the next few years. Next slide. So our next steps, early May, the governor will put out its May revise. We have the state adopted budget. So while that is required by law by June 30th, usually we know the details 10 to 15 days before that. But we won't have the impacts of that in the final budget because we just won't have enough time to impact. So the final budget will be based on a state level on the governor's May revise. We'll have an updated assessed valuation tracker. As I noted, we're watching that daily. We're going to monitor enrollment. We noted that we're down in enrollment. And actually, when we look at our Don Scatena gave us an update on where we are in actual enrollment, and we're actually about 50 students under where our projections are right now. So that could change, but it's where we are right now. We're going to continue to manage the positions and expenditures that are funded by COVID-19 as we step those down over the next few years. We're going to analyze our long-term management plans with the district goals. We'll manage our fund balance to maintain fiscal solvency. And we're going to resist the use of using future projected dollars or one-time monies to justify paying ongoing expenditures. Next slide. So I get to come and give this presentation to the board and the community, but Valerie Miller and Vanessa Castano, they're really doing the hard work. They're doing the work behind the scenes. All these numbers are put together by them, and they're working really long hours and doing a great job getting all this information. So my thanks to them on this one. All right, with that, I'm happy to open it up to the board for questions. Maybe we take down, and we can bring it back up if we need to.
So Linda, you had some questions.
I just wanted to ask, can we take out the word resist and put in the word will not? Is that possible?
The board can make whatever decisions they want. I just said resist, but
I like will not. Resist is kind of, ambiguous. So thank you. And I think that, thank you to everyone, Valerie, Vanessa, Yancy. I think this is a really good presentation of all of the data. And I like how it's succinct it is too. So thank you.
Great.
I also really appreciate all the work and the detail. And I have just a couple of questions on, again, you don't have to put it up, but on slide 26, expenditures, you did go over the services and the increases in utilities, elections, the safety officer. I'm curious as to the savings, in particular, the non-instructional supplies and the other operating expenses, because those are significant savings. I'm wondering how the decrease in expenditures are happening.
So most of that is related to COVID related. So, KN95 masks or, tests, COVID-19 tests or, things like that are being funded by our COVID budgets. They also are where uncommitted funds in categorical funding get usually budgeted into. So the assumption is that it gets supplied, they can put into supplies. As I noted, those will likely roll over to next year. And so, I see, potential increase for that. We also, in terms on the COVID side, we don't know where we're going to be. We're hoping that we're going in a good direction and, that things have been getting better and we've needed less testing and less of those things. But, this is a little bit of a roller coaster that we're on. So hopefully we're going in the right direction.
And I agree with a lot of your assumptions and your next steps. So, and I do agree, resist or not for future funds, for future dollars. So one-time money. So let's keep that separate. So I think we could make even a board policy on that. But yeah, thank you. It was a great presentation, very thorough.
Okay.
Bob.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for that presentation. I guess Yancy, you're responsible for the cartoons, and the rest of your team turns the wrenches and makes the thing hum. So I've got a couple of questions, and they're sort of thoughts and they're questions. One of the things I've been thinking about, and I don't know that we ever talk about it, is the head count in the DO. And we never track it and we never talk about what it looks like. And I think from a budget perspective, that would be a good information to really look at, and it's not that it's not ever going to go up or that it may or may not go down, but I think we need to understand the functions, because sometimes it shifts from the sites to the office and vice versa. It gets moved around, but I really think we have to, we kind of have to keep our eye on the ball there, that we don't get top heavy in terms of how we operate. So that's, and like I said, I didn't, while you were there, I didn't want to interrupt the flow to kind of, okay, let's see if we can extrapolate some data there. So the other thing, it looks like, okay, we're starting to the COVID money is still running out and we still got positions out there. So we're going to continue to see some of these positions run out in out years as the COVID money continues to dry up, right?
Correct. So we, the board approved the ELO budget last spring. We've added the ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 funding to support those. But yeah, we have done about a 1/3 step down from 21-22 to 22-23. We look at another 1/3 going into next year, which is, mathematically a 50% cut, but it's only 1/3 of the initial investment. And then in the last year, obviously, the last 1/3 is the full remainder. I will give Dr. Kemke and Mr. Simmons some credit. They are, every day looking under the couch cushions, looking for new funding, and looking for ways to continue some of these. As the board heard, the A through G a lot of these, intervention strategies are really best practices, for students who need some additional support. And so a lot of our ELO and intervention sections or just other interventions are, very relevant when we look at A to G and other things. So they are looking for other ways to continue some of those interventions and some investments any way they can. And then, we may have to make some tough decisions moving forward of, maybe some of the things that we've done for a while, maybe we need to trade some of those out for some of those interventions that we've done, if they've been proven to be effective to support our students.
Okay, and one question, and this is a follow-up, I think, on one of Greg's questions on the other revenue side, where you're not forecasting, we don't know how much money is coming through, but isn't that just a pass-through so it doesn't impact the ending balance? So we're not counting on the money, but if the money shows up, the expenses will show up. And if they don't, it's only a matter of timing from year to year. So,
yeah. So the only ones that we'll include are if there's related staffing to them and we need something to cover the cost of that staffing because, but everything else, you're very true, is really an in and out. The site receives the funding and then they're given authorization to spend it. It doesn't impact our fund balance. It doesn't impact our allocations to the sites. It's just an in and out. You're absolutely correct.
What's going to happen to the status of the contra account? Is it just floating in limbo? It was $1.5 million last I heard. What is it these days?
It's higher than that. I'd have to go back and pull on that. But we put in a little bit of the increase every year in order to, as our secured revenue increases, so that we're increasing it with the level of our secured taxes. So as a percentage of our overall, it's staying similar, but as a real dollar number, it's going up.
Okay, that's probably a good thing because it's everything else is shrinking in value. But okay, we got to keep it relevant. Now the last thing is sort of an out-year discussion, and we've got a problem with decreasing enrollment throughout the district pretty much. And we've got real problems with the north end of the county, north end of the district, and we've talked about trying to drive enrollment. And at this point, it's kind of a zero sum because if we start driving enrollment to the north, it's just going to subtract from the south. And, while there may be more students in particular campuses, apparently, if you read everything in the news, people are leaving California in droves, and they've pretty well had it. At some point, I think you mentioned smaller campuses and there was like smaller learning centers and stuff. And one of the things, when we get smaller campuses, how are we going to manage administration and the cost of a site? In terms of, do you need as many on-site personnel for 1,000 people, or if you get below 1,000, and if you get below 1,000 or somewhere in that neighborhood, you start losing all your comprehensive offerings. Are we thinking about that from a strategic? It looks like the superintendent's just dying to respond to that one. I'll let somebody finish that. Give me an answer on that because I think that's really important.
Kevin, you're Dr. Scully, thank you.
So I think you could hear me, right? I'm not muted, right?
I am muted.
Oh, thank you. So Mike Fine is the director of FCMAT, and Yancey, you may have heard this as well, that he says that when you're on the way down in terms of enrollment, that it's 40 cents a dollar that you're saving. And on the way up, you really save money because you're hiring younger teachers, all those kinds of things. So you do make some savings, but not as much. We do have a differentiated administrative staffing at the schools now. The bigger schools have 3 assistant principals and sometimes a part-time dean, and the smaller schools have 2 assistant principals and a dean. So those are things that we're going to have to look at as we go forward. But you still have the same number of games to go to. You still got a librarian, you've got a school secretary, all those things. So that's what's really crushed. Like Oakland, for example, they haven't closed any schools, and I'm not proposing we're anywhere near closing, but this is going to be an issue for the board. I think the other piece is that our common bell schedule or instructional schedule helps us because we can share some staff, and we'll be bringing you at the next meeting. Dr. Kemp, you bring the instructional schedule, so that's a possibility. Obviously, Mills and Cap are close by, but there's decisions the board's going to have to make about those kinds of things and what the offerings are as we go forward. And technology can help us as well.
Those are all the questions I had. Thank you.
So I want to look at a couple of suggestions here. Yeah, I'm not sure it's exactly a zero sum in terms of helping the northern schools with their enrollment. For instance, I'm really concerned about the situation with CAP, and if we're anywhere near accurate in the projections that are in the presentation. And I'm just wondering if I think it's maybe a good time to think about trying something innovative around actually a district-wide effort to increase the enrollment at CAP, maybe using the International Baccalaureate program. And I don't know how, I don't know exactly how many students you could possibly recruit from that, but it's a unique program, and it's a program that over the years we've invested very heavily in. I would say probably hundreds of thousands of dollars over 10 or 15 years. And it's a program that the diploma is a highly valuable instrument to come out with, and I don't think very many people know about the International Baccalaureate program at CAP, even in San Bruno. But I think particularly over the last couple of years with COVID, I think the programs slipped some in terms of recruitment and knowledge, and I would like to take a look at maybe trying something innovative that maybe even has a transportation component to it, to see if we could market that program and try to recruit, even if we got 40, 50 students over time more into CAP. I think that would be helpful. And it's one of those things where I spent years saying we could vastly increase middle college, and people kept telling me you can't do it, and we couldn't do it because we didn't open the access to it, and we didn't promote it. And as soon as we opened access to it and we promoted it, it doubled. And now we're turning people away from it. So I'm not sure that you couldn't make IB a pretty attractive program for people in the district. The second thing I think we need is really think through and make sure we have a strategy for COVID on the other side. We just don't know what this virus is going to do, and we've got most of the world unvaccinated, unfortunately, and the virus continues to mutate. And I just think we need to make sure that we're prepared. If, I think we should have like a level 1, level 2, or level 3 type strategy, and make sure our resources are in place. And we know what we're going to do if we suddenly have to have a lot of students in online learning. If we've got if we have different levels of learning that has to go into place at some point, I think we need to make sure that we're prepared for that, and we've got the budget and the strategy to do that. The third area, which I can't quite tell from the presentation, is I think we need a lot of resources, not only next year, but in the coming several years, for academic recovery. I think we're going to have a lot of freshman classes coming in, seriously behind, 6th grade level, maybe even lower than 6th grade level from some districts. And that's going to affect teaching and learning fairly dramatically. And we're going to need a lot of resources if we're going to keep up our standards. And I think it's critical that we do that. And I think we need to be very targeted and very intentional with our resources, and make sure those resources are available, and we know what we're doing, because that's going to affect high school for several years at least. And the fourth area where I think we need to do a serious review is we have increased the stipends in this district tremendously over the last 4 years, I would say, for sure. I think the time is right to just go back and do a complete review of stipends and see, what do we need, what do we still need, and how are we paying for them? And I think it's a category that needs to be reviewed. I just think we have a tremendous number of stipends in this district compared to what we had 4 or 5 years ago, and I think those need to be assessed and reviewed, and make sure that we still need what we're paying for, and we still have the resources to fund those going forward. So that's those are my comments. Greg?
Actually, you brought up some really good points. I just wanted to say good job. But I do want to talk about one that I think is a little bit more complicated, in that's, again, than trying to recruit for CAP. I know I really want to commend Dr. Skelly. I know he's talked about it before, about trying to look at shared, resources, and how can we share so we don't miss, when we start going down into numbers, that we won't miss programs, that electives and programs can stay intact if we can start sharing and having that combination with Mills and CAP. And I think that's a good thing. But again, trying to recruit within our own district, I don't think is a wise idea. I think, we have to consider, do we want to start bringing in from outside our district? And that's a question, because we're a community funded district. Do we really want to do that or not? So again, I don't think there's going to be any financial issues talking about the decrease, but there is going to be programmatic issues that we really need to contemplate, and how we're going to expend the money. And so, yes, I think that's something that we need to consider. The other thing was mental health. I just looked recently that the state superintendent was talking about going through a bill to get more funding for mental health services for us. And, looking at the document with the staffing projections for mental health therapists, will that be something that we'll be able to recoup from? I don't know if CASBO's talked about it. Get money from. The other thing is, I'm really distraught as usual with the STIRS and PERS no help whatsoever issue, and I'm wondering if that's going to change at all. So if you and what do we need to do that? Because I'm surprised AXA or CSBA hasn't even talked about it.
Couple of quick answers on that. Yeah, we'll look at the additional any additional mental health funding. The funding now obviously doesn't cover all of the programs and costs that we do. This district has been really proactive and really looking at what's the need out there and trying to meet that need. But any funding that offsets those costs or any grants that help support that, I know there's the look for grants internally as well as state funding would both be there. I was a little surprised we didn't see any relief on STIRS and PERS in the governor's January budget. So you won't see me being fooled twice by saying I expect to see it in the May revise. I know there is some hope of that, but when we were at the CASBO conference, there were definitely really smart folks on both sides of this, of who, whether that be school services or capital advisors or FICMAT, on what the expectation was from the state, whether just to put it in the LCFF, which obviously wouldn't impact us as a community funded district, or giving districts very specific STIRS and PERS related relief. I think it's just to be really clear that the vast portion of the impact of shoring up the pension systems, the state has done a little bit, but the vast impact has been on local school districts and continues to be. And while they've given us mostly a little bit of one-time relief, they haven't changed their general plan of the vast majority of the additional cost is being borne by the school districts. So I don't expect any real permanent relief. If they do give temporary relief, we'll take it, obviously, but it's only temporary.
Thank you.
Linda, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I have a couple comments after listening to everyone else. I think that the numbers we have now could be subject to change due to all the construction that's going on up there. There's giant complex coming on next to BART in Millbrae, right along the road there. When that comes online, there are going to be people there, and I would anticipate that we could pick up students. And San Bruno also has some projects in, that are going to add housing. So I would think that those numbers could change, and the percentages aren't so high, but I don't know. I just think that we're going to see some changes as all this housing gets developed. I would ask Jesse and the other principals what would attract students to CAP. Jesse would be the perfect person to have an answer for that. And I also, Mr. Boyes, and I also think the other principals could have ideas too. I mean, things that I know that at one point in time, the lack of APs at CAP had some students not wanting to go there because they wanted more AP classes. Don't know how that's going at this point. Expanding the Skyline program. I know that there was keen interest in more people who wanted to attend the CSM program. So if we could, if it's possible to expand the Skyline program to make that and advertise it so that kids say, whoa, I could go to CAP and go to Skyline and come out AA and a diploma. And that's a pretty exciting thing to be able to do. We also talked about after hours classes. We talked about that a while ago when COVID was really active, and how we, some kids could really benefit from after hour classes. And that might be something, if we would do that, pilot it up at CAP so that students who would go to CAP would have access to classes, after hours. That would attract, and that might attract more students up there. I don't know the split of the EL population as far as, I would assume that all the EL students in San Bruno are going to San Bruno program to CAP, and all the EL students in San Mateo are going to San Mateo. in Hillsdale and other schools. So yeah, it would seem like we might have more EL students up there than we have in the school, but that's just another thing. As far as outside students, we can't do that to our taxpayers. So I'd love to find ways that we can find programs that we could offer that would help students really see CAP as a destination. So thank you.
Okay.
All
That's
right.
it.
The next steps, if there's significant information in the May revise, we'll come back at the May 19th meeting with some details. If it's similar to the January budget, you won't see that. And then on June 9th, you'll see the preliminary budget. And June 23rd, we'll bring a budget for the board to consider adopting before the June 30th deadline. So that's all. Thank you.
Have we ever had a meeting with no participants?
I'm starting to take it personally.
Don't take it personally, Yancy. I thought it was an excellent
Budget.
presentation, Vanessa, Valerie. They missed a really good presentation
Absolutely.
and some
Well,
good information.
People aren't very worried about the district's finances. I think you could take it that as a
Yeah.
positive.
Yeah, exactly. You're doing something right, Yancy.
Well,
That's
I-
what they're saying.
Yeah.
Valerie and Vanessa are doing something right. How about
Absolutely.
that?
The whole team. You're right. You're absolutely
Yay.
right. The whole team. You guys know what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Phew.
Appreciate it.
So
Thank you.
I'm going to recess this into our closed session. Do people want 5 minutes before closed session?
Mhm.
Okay, so why don't we?
Can you stay on here?
Pardon?
No, different link.
You have a different link, Greg.
Okay.
See you in 5 minutes. We'll turn it on now.
Why don't
and then-
we come back at 10 to 7?
Okay.
Perfect.
6:50.
Perfect.